Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive.
Hello there.
If you're looking to really understand and improve your English, definitely hit that subscribe button for the channel.
Yeah, lots more coming.
We've got lots more of these in-depth explorations planned for you.
Absolutely.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Now, for those of you tuning in maybe for the first time, this is where we take sources that you, our listener, have shared with us.
That's right. You give us the material.
And we really dig down deep to find the most important bits, the key knowledge, the insights.
We sort of sift through it all for you.
Exactly. We act as your guides, helping you understand what really matters most, those surprising facts, maybe those light bulb moments that make learning actually stick.
So you don't have to do all the heavy lifting yourself.
Precisely. You provide the starting point, and we help you navigate it all to get the clearest possible understanding.
That's the goal.
So today, we're taking a deep dive into a really interesting collection of transcripts. They're from the Learn English with EnglishClass101.com YouTube channel.
Oh yeah, they have some great stuff over there.
They really do. And we're focusing specifically on key aspects of English grammar and vocabulary learning.
It looks like a really comprehensive set of materials covering some pretty fundamental areas for learners.
Absolutely. We've got, the best of March 2025 video transcript first.
Okay.
And that gives us a good look at the future perfect tense and also how to use that expression by the time.
Future perfect. That can be a tricky one. And by the time, very useful phrase.
Definitely. Then we also have several transcripts from their 3-step English series. Each one tackles a specific grammar point.
Like what?
Well, there's one on the preposition for.
Oh, for has so many uses.
Right. And another on the conjunction as another versatile one.
As it can be tricky too.
Then there's how to form embedded questions, to sound a bit more polite or indirect.
Oh, that's super important for natural conversation. Essential.
Yeah. And how to ask about amenities, like what's available somewhere.
Practical stuff,
Right.
like in hotel or shop.
Exactly. Also, how to extend apologies in a more meaningful way than just saying sorry.
Going beyond the basic apology.
Good. And finally, how to make promises clearly in English.
Okay, so a real mix of grammar points there.
It is, and it's not just grammar, right?
No, it looks like there are insights into building vocabulary too.
Yeah, the sources mention their approach, including things like core word lists.
Focusing on the most frequent words. That's a smart strategy.
Very much so. So our mission today, basically, is to give you a really solid, structured understanding of these key English grammar concepts.
And the learning strategies presented in these resources.
Exactly. We're aiming for those, moments. Those moments were just clicks. Yeah. And practical takeaways that you can hopefully use immediately in your own English learning journey.
Sounds like a plan. Where should we start?
Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to start with that Best of March 2025 video.
Right. The one covering future perfect and by the time.
Precisely. And it gets into using the future perfect tense to talk about things that will be finished.
Or will have been happening for a certain amount of time.
At a specific point in the future, it's kind of looking forward, then looking back from that future point.
Exactly. It's a way to look forward from a future moment and see what will have already happened or what will have been in progress up until then.
Okay, so the video kicks off by explaining the basic structure. How do we actually form this future perfect tense?
Well, the lesson says we use it for actions or conditions completed or continuing up to a future point.
Right.
And the basic structure they give is subject plus will have.
Okay, will have.
Plus the past participle.
The past participle. That's the third form of the verb. Right, like eaten, gone, studied.
Exactly. Often ends in ed, but not always, like eaten or slept.
Okay, so the examples they give are like, I will have eaten.
Or she will have slept.
Seems straightforward enough. It's about something being done before a future deadline, essentially.
Yes, that's the core idea. An option reaching completion before or by a defined future moment.
And making it negative, is that just adding not?
Pretty much. You just replace will have with won't have.
Won't have, okay.
So you get she won't have eaten.
Or he won't have slept.
Right. Won't is just the short form for will not.
Right.
Same function, just negating it.
Got it. So whether you're talking about a future completion or something that won't be completed by then, the structure is pretty consistent.
It'll see together nicely.
Now, the video also mentions a continuous form. Future perfect continuous.
Yes. That adds another layer.
How does that work? It lets us talk about actions that will have been ongoing, right? For a duration of time leading up to that future point.
Precisely. The structure for this one is subject plus will have been.
Okay, will have been.
Plus the ing form of the verb, the present participle.
Right, the ing form. So examples like, she will have been eating.
Or he will have been sleeping.
Okay, so this form really paints a picture of an action in progress over a period of time leading up to that future moment.
Exactly. The continuous form puts the emphasis on how long the activity will have been happening by that future point.
Rather than just whether it's finished or not.
Right. It's about the duration up to that point.
And the negative for the continuous, just add won't.
Yep, same principle. Put won't before have been.
So, he won't have been sleeping.
Or she won't have been working. It follows the same pattern.
Okay, that makes sense. Structures seem logical. What about forming questions using the future perfect?
Good question. The video explains we usually start with a question word.
Like what, where, how long?
Yeah, things like how much, how many, or especially how long are pretty common with this tense.
Okay, so start with the question word, then what?
Then you follow with will, then the subject.
Right, invert the subject and will.
Exactly. Then have, and finally, either the past participle for the simple future perfect.
Like, how much will she have eaten?
Yeah. Or, for the continuous form, it's have been plus the ing verb.
Ah, okay, so the example they gave was, how long will he have been sleeping?
Perfect example.
Yeah.
That uses the continuous question form.
So placing will before the subject is the key signal. It's a question.
That's the main grammatical switch for questions, yes. And the question word specifies what information you're actually looking for.
Got it. Okay, so we have the basic structures, positive, negative, continuous, and questions. That seems like a solid foundation for the future perfect itself.
That covers the core mechanics of the tense.
Now, let's move on to that really useful expression the video highlights. By the time.
Ah, yes. By the time.
Yeah.
Crucial companion to the future. Perfect awesome.
The video explains we use it to indicate that an action or condition will end or be completed or maybe change at or before a specific point in the future.
Exactly. It sets that future point of reference.
It's like you said, a deadline marker for a future event.
That's a great way to think about it. By the time sets that future milestone, and the main clause, often using future perfect, tells us the state of affairs at that milestone.
The video even had a little timeline graphic, didn't it, to visualize this?
Yeah, I remember that. It showed time moving forward.
Right, with now marked and the future stretching out, and there was like a wavy line for the future perfect action happening over time.
Extending into the future, yeah.
And then a specific point marked further along that timeline, labeled as the by the time point.
And the graphic showed the action sort of concluding or reaching a state right around that by the time marker.
It really helped visualize that idea of an action building up to or continuing until that specific future moment that by the time defines.
Visuals like that can be really helpful for grammar concepts.
Definitely. And to make it even clearer, the video gives some excellent example sentences combining future perfect with by the time.
Okay, let's look at those.
The first one was, by the time I graduate from college, I will have studied in schools for 16 years.
Right. Classic example.
Let's break that down. By the time I graduate from college, that's setting the future point, right?
Yes. Graduation is the future milestone.
And then, I will have studied in schools for 16 years. That's the future perfect part, the action completed by then.
Exactly. It's looking ahead to graduation and calculating the total duration of schooling up to that specific future moment.
What strikes you as particularly interesting about this specific example?
Well, it's that connection, isn't it? Connecting a future event, graduation, to this cumulative action from the past and present that reaches a kind of completion point at that future event.
Yeah, it really emphasizes the total duration.
It does. And as the video points out, the important implication is that the speaker hasn't graduated yet. This whole statement is only true in the future.
Right, it's all anchored to that future marker. Okay, the next example reversed the order slightly.
Which one was that?
We will have been waiting for 3 hours by the time the plane arrives.
Okay. So the future perfect continuous comes first here.
Exactly. We will have been waiting, emphasizing the ongoing nature of the waiting.
And the future marker is by the time the plane arrives.
What do you notice in this one? The reversed order, does it change the feel?
I think it definitely puts more focus on the duration of the waiting itself. Starting with, we will have been waiting for 3 hours. really highlights that length of time.
Yeah, it sounds a bit more emphatic about the waiting.
It does. It emphasizes that the waiting is the main thing, and it will have been going on for a significant chunk of time, 3 hours, when the plane finally arrives.
It conveys maybe sense of anticipation or maybe even a little bit of impatience.
Could be, yeah. It focuses on that accumulated time spent waiting up until the arrival.
Okay. And the last example sentence they gave was, by the time he quits his job, he will have been working for that company for 10 years.
Another good one with a continuous form.
Again, by the time he quits his job, that's our future event we're looking towards.
The point of reference.
And he will have been working for that company for 10 years shows that continuous action, working, that will have reached a full decade by that future point. What's the key takeaway from this one, according to the video?
The really crucial element here, as the video points out, is that this statement is not true now.
Right. He hasn't quit yet. He hasn't worked there 10 years yet.
Exactly. The sentence is looking forward to a future plan or possibility, quitting and stating the duration of his employment up to that future point in time.
So again, it highlights the accumulation of time, the duration leading up to that future action or event.
Precisely. It frames the 10 years in relation to the future act of quitting.
Now, this next part is super important. A key grammar rule the video really emphasizes.
What's that?
It's about the verb tense we use after by the time, in that by the time clause itself.
Ah, yes. This is a common mistake area for learners.
Totally. Even though we're talking about a future point like graduate or arrives or quits, the video stresses we absolutely do not use future tenses like will graduate or is going to arrive in that clause.
Right. You don't say, by the time I will graduate.
No. Instead, what tense do we use?
We use the simple present tense.
Simple present. So by the time I graduate, or by the time the plane arrives, or by the time he quits.
Exactly. The video even gives the incorrect examples to avoid, like by the time I will graduate and by the time I'm going to graduate.
Why is this distinction so critical? Why simple present for a future event in this specific clause?
Well, it's a fundamental rule for these kinds of time clauses in English.
Yeah.
The by the time clause acts as an adverbial clause of time.
Okay.
And in English, when these time clauses refer to the future and are connected to a main clause that's also in a future tense, like our future perfect examples, we typically use the simple present in the time clause.
So it's just a rule of how these future time clauses work grammatically.
Pretty much. It helps establish a clear, logical sequence of events in the future within the sentence structure. It signals when this future thing happens, simple present, this other thing will have happened, future perfect.
Got it. Simple present in the by the time part. That's a key takeaway.
Definitely one to remember.
And this naturally leads to a question many learners probably have. Can we just use when instead of by the time? Are they interchangeable?
Ah, good question. The video addresses this. It explains that sometimes, maybe grammatically it could work, but it can definitely change the feeling or the emphasis of the sentence.
How so? Let's revisit that plane example. We will have been waiting for 3 hours by the time the plane arrives.
Okay.
If we change that to, we will have been waiting for 3 hours when the plane arrives, what's the subtle shift in meaning or feeling?
Well, using when here, I think, really loses that specific sense of the action, the waiting continuing, and building up to that specific point of arrival. When the plane arrives, feels more like it's just marking the point in time that the plane gets there. It suggests the waiting will be 3 hours at that moment, but it doesn't carry the same strong implication of the waiting process leading up to the arrival in the same way by the time does.
So when is more like just a simultaneous point.
It can feel that way, yeah. More like stating two things happening around the same time rather than one action accumulating until the other happens. By the time here there really emphasizes that deadline or culmination point for the first action.
That makes perfect sense. It loses that feeling of anticipation or the accumulation of time spent waiting. The video gives another example comparison, right, with the graduation sentence.
Yeah, when I graduate from college, I will have studied in schools for 16 years.
The video points out that while it might be grammatically okay,
it doesn't have that same feeling of those 16 years of study leading up to and culminating in that graduation point.
Right. That sense of a long-term effort reaching its conclusion, which by the time I graduate, really captures much better.
Exactly. When just marks the time point at which the studying total will be 16 years. By the time adds that extra layer, the feeling that the studying continues up to and perhaps concludes at that graduation point, really highlighting the duration by then.
So by the time quasar carries more weight in terms of duration and culmination.
I think that's a good way to summarize it, yeah.
Okay. And what about asking questions using by the time? The video had an example for that too.
It did. It was. By the time you move to your new house, how long will you have lived in this city?
Okay. So by the time you move to your new house, that's our future point of reference again, using simple present move.
Check.
And the question part uses future perfect. How long will you have lived in this city? Asking about the duration leading up to that move.
Right.
What does using by the time imply in this question specifically?
In this question format, by the time really emphasizes that the asker is interested in the total accumulation of experience in this case. The years lived in the city right up to that moment of moving.
Not just the number of years, but the whole period.
Sort of, yeah. It suggests a collection of memories, experiences, time spent, all gathered over that entire period leading to the move. It feels a bit richer than just asking about the duration at the exact moment of moving. It implies a history that's tied to that future endpoint.
That's a nice nuance. It's not just a number, it's the whole span up to that point.
Exactly. By the time frames it that way.
Okay, wow. That was a really thorough exploration of the future, perfect tense, and how it works with by the time. Lots of important details there.
Definitely a dense topic, but crucial for expressing those future relationships accurately.
Agreed. Now let's switch gears completely. We're going to dive into the first of those 3-step English lessons. This one focuses on the preposition for.
Ah, for. Such a common little word, but it does so much work.
Right. It seems simple, but the video points out it has a surprising amount of versatility, lots of different meanings packed into one short word.
Absolutely. Prepositions are often like that, carrying multiple meanings depending on the context. And really understanding these different uses of for is so important for clear, nuanced communication in English.
Okay, so the video breaks down 8 key ways we use for. Let's go through them. The first one is to express purpose, or the intended use of something.
Right, what something is designed for or why it exists.
This could be for places or objects. Can you give us a few examples of how this works in sentences based on the video?
Certainly. The examples they provide are very clear, like, this textbook is for my science class.
Okay, so the textbook's purpose is the science class.
Exactly. Or, the conference room is for meetings.
The room's use is meetings. Makes sense.
And here's an idea for a new product.
So the idea's aim or goal is a new product.
Precisely. In all these cases, for connects the subject, the textbook, the room, the idea with its intended function or the reason behind it.
It's almost like saying this exists in order to, or this is designed to be used for something.
That's a good way to think about it. The video also notes that the subject and the purpose it serves often form a pretty logical pair. Textbook for class, room for meetings.
Right. Okay, purpose is the first use. What's the second common use of for?
The second one is probably one of the most common, indicating duration.
Ah, length of time. Yeah, this one feels pretty familiar for most learners, I think.
Yes, definitely one of the core meanings. Examples like, he had lived here for 6 years.
Okay, straightforward duration.
They talked for 2 hours.
Duration of the talking.
We waited for about 15 minutes.
Duration of waiting with that about for approximation.
Right. All these clearly show a specific period of time during which an action happened or a state continued.
And the video made a good point about usually using the plural form for time units, right? Like years, hours, minutes, when the duration is more than one.
Yes, that's a standard grammatical point. For 1 year, but for 2 years.
And that little detail about placing about before the duration, as in for about 15 minutes, is useful for sounding natural when you're estimating.
It is. It flows better than saying for 15 minutes about, for example.
Definitely. Okay, so purpose, duration. What's the third way for is used?
The third use is to describe a status or a condition, and this often involves expressing an emotion or a situation that is felt by someone else or intended for someone else.
Okay, this sounds a bit more nuanced than just time or purpose.
It can be. This use of for often deals with feelings or states directed towards or on behalf of another person or group.
Like what kind of examples?
Well, I'm so happy for you is a classic.
Ah, yes. Meaning you feel happy because something good happened to them.
Exactly. You share their happiness. The video contrasts this with I'm happy to you, which doesn't really work in English for this meaning.
Right, that sounds wrong. What other examples for status or condition?
This is great news for the company.
Okay, so the company benefits from the news, or the good news is directed at the company.
Yes, the company is the recipient or beneficiary of the good status, the news, Or the lecture was hard for the students to understand.
Ah, so it specifies who experienced the difficulty, who the condition applied to?
Precisely. In these cases, for marks the recipient of the feeling, happiness, the beneficiary of the condition, good news, or the group affected by the condition, difficulty.
That distinction between for you, sharing emotion, and, say, to you, like giving something to you, is really important to get right in that happiness context.
Very important for expressing empathy correctly.
Okay. Now, the fourth use of for, mentioned in the video, is a bit unexpected, maybe, using for as an older, somewhat old-fashioned way of saying because.
Yes. This one isn't common in everyday modern speech, but you definitely see it sometimes.
I was a bit surprised when I first learned this one existed.
It's definitely less frequent now, but as the video correctly points out, you might encounter it in older literature, maybe poetry, or even in more formal, slightly archaic writing styles.
What kind of examples did they give for this because meaning?
Let's see. He remembers that day, for it was a sad day.
Okay, so for it was a sad day means because it was a sad day.
Exactly. Another one. They walked home quickly, for the night was cold and dark.
Again, for means because the night was cold and dark.
Right. And she went into the town, for she had many errands to attend to.
Because she had errands. Okay.
All these clearly show for being used to indicate the reason or cause for the main action, just like we use because today.
If you swap because into those sentences, the meaning is identical, but because just sounds, well, normal now.
It does. For, in this sense, definitely has an older, more literary feel to it. But it's good to be aware of it if you encounter it reading.
Absolutely. It's fascinating how language evolves. Okay, use number 5 for brings us back to something much more common and straightforward.
Which is?
Using for to indicate the recipient of something, the person who gets something or benefits from an action.
Yes, the beneficiary. This is all about giving and receiving. Very common.
What are the examples here?
Things like, the boy drew a picture for his mother.
Okay, the mother is the recipient of the picture.
I bought this coffee for you.
You are the recipient of the coffee.
Flowers for me. How nice.
Me is the recipient. Okay, this one seems pretty intuitive. For marks who it's intended for.
Very much so. A clear marker of the beneficiary.
All right, moving on to use number 6, talking about prices and rates.
Yes, using for with money or values.
How does this work? Showing how much something costs or the terms of a sale.
Exactly. For is commonly used with numerical values to state the price. Like, I got this shirt for $20.
Simple enough. Shirt costs $20.
Or they explain phrases like a 2-for-1 sale.
Meaning you get 2 items, but only pay the price of 1.
Right. You get 2 for the price of 1. That's a really common everyday use.
And also using the phrase for free.
Yes. The hotel gave us bags for free, meaning at no cost for 0 price. Another very common idiom using for.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, the last 2 uses of for that the video discusses are a bit more focused on grammatical function, aren't they?
Yes, they involve specific grammatical structures.
The 7th use is using for together with gerunds. And just a reminder, gerunds are those verb forms ending in ing that act like nouns.
Right, like swimming. And swimming is fun.
This is an area where learners sometimes get a bit confused, I think, between using for plus gerund and maybe using an infinitive to plus verb.
Absolutely, it can be tricky. The video correctly points out that when an ing verb is functioning as a noun, a gerund, we often use for before it to explain the purpose or the use of something.
Can you give the examples for those?
Sure. This part of the computer is for storing data.
Okay, storing data is the purpose of the computer part. Storing is the gerund.
Right. Another one. A sharp knife is important for cutting vegetables.
The purpose or function related to the knife is cutting vegetables. Cutting is the gerund.
And GPS tags are used for tracking wild animals.
The use of the tags is tracking wild animals. Tracking is the gerund.
All illustrate that pattern. For plus ing verb, gerund, explaining purpose or use.
And the video mentions it's important not to confuse this with the infinitive to plus verb. Like you might say, knife is used to cut vegetables. How does the for plus gerund version differ in feeling, if at all?
That's a subtle point. Sometimes they are interchangeable, but the video suggests that the for plus gerund structure often feels a bit more like explaining the general function or the designed use of something. maybe slightly more descriptive or instructional in tone.
Whereas to cut might feel more like expressing a specific action or intent in a particular situation.
Perhaps, yeah. It's a fine distinction, but the 4+ gerund often emphasizes the inherent purpose. Like storing data is what this part is for.
That's a helpful way to think about it. Okay, and the 8th and final use of for covered.
The final one is in questions about purpose, specifically using common question forms.
Like which ones?
Like the very short and common what for.
Which just means why, basically.
Yeah. Exactly, a very concise way to ask why. And also longer forms like, what do you need that for?
Asking the purpose of that.
And what did you do that for?
Asking the reason behind an action.
These are absolutely essential question structures for asking about reasons and intentions behind objects or actions in everyday conversation. Crucial for clarification.
Wow. Okay, that was a really comprehensive look at for. Purpose, duration, status condition, the old because, recipient, price, with gerunds for purpose and in questions about purpose, 8 distinct uses.
It really shows how much work that little preposition does.
It certainly does. Now let's move on to another one of those highly versatile words, the conjunction as.
As. Another chameleon word in English.
Exactly. The next 3-step English lesson explores 6 distinct ways that as can be used in sentences.
And again, understanding these different functions is key, because as popping up in a sentence can mean several different things, which can lead to confusion if you're not aware of the possibilities. This lesson seems to break it down nicely.
Okay, let's look at the first use of as that the video highlights. It's used to show the role or the purpose of someone or something.
Right. Similar in concept to one of the uses of for, but grammatically different here with as.
We often see this with job titles or explaining how something is used. Can you give us some examples from the video for this?
Certainly. The example, he's been working as a salesman for about 6 years.
Okay, as a salesman indicates his job role.
Precisely. Or she was hired as the new creative director.
As the new creative director specifies the position she got.
Right. And for objects, this room can be used as a meeting room or as a break room.
Okay, explaining the different functions or purposes the room can serve.
Exactly. In each case, as connects the subject, he, she, this room, with its function, its role, or its intended purpose. It specifies what capacity they're acting in or being used for.
Right. It's similar to saying in the capacity of or serving the function of. Okay, role purpose is the first use. What's the second way as is used?
The second common use is to mean while or at the same time.
Indicating simultaneity. 2 things happening together.
Exactly. It connects 2 actions or events that are occurring concurrently. Like, they arrived as we were leaving.
Okay, arrival and leaving happened at roughly the same moment.
Or, the fire alarm started ringing as we sat down in the restaurant.
Alarm ringing and sitting down coincided.
And she smiled as she walked across the stage.
Smiling and walking happened simultaneously.
Right. The video also makes a useful point comparing as and while here.
No. What's the difference?
It notes that while often pairs more naturally with progressive actions, those linking verbs, especially when 2 longer actions are happening over the same period.
So maybe while I was cooking, he was reading.
Exactly. As can sometimes feel a bit more like marking the specific moment. Things coincide, especially if one action is shorter, like the fire alarm starting as we sat down. But there's definitely overlap in usage.
That's a useful nuance to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, simultaneous actions. What's the third way as is used according to the video?
The third use is to express cause and result, similar to how we saw for used in that old-fashioned way, meaning because.
Yeah, so as can also mean because.
Yes, although the video mentions this usage is often considered a bit more formal than just using because in everyday speech.
Okay, so as introduces the reason or cause for something else happening. What examples did they give?
Let's see. He went to bed early as he had an important meeting in the morning.
Okay, the reason for going to bed early was the meeting. As because.
Right. She prepared a mountain of food as she was expecting many guests at her party.
Reason for lots of food was expecting guests. As because.
And they decided to move to a bigger house as they were planning to have a family.
Reason for moving was planning a family. As because.
All these show that causal link. The as clause gives the reason for the main clause action.
So while because is more common day to day, using as for cause result is perfectly fine, especially maybe in writing or slightly more formal situations.
Exactly. It's good to recognize this meaning when you see it.
Okay. Use number 4 for as is particularly interesting. The video highlights. It's used to express two changes happening at the same time.
Ah, yes. This is a distinct one. It really highlights a correlation between two things that are increasing or decreasing together or in relation to each other.
It has a very specific feel when you hear it used this way.
It does. It often implies that one change might be influencing the other, or they're just progressing in parallel.
What are the examples for this?
As you get older, it gets harder and harder to lose weight.
Okay, two things changing together. Age increases, difficulty of losing weight increases.
Right. Notice the comparative, harder and harder.
Yeah.
That's common in this pattern. Another one, the air got colder and colder as we climbed up the mountain.
Two simultaneous changes again.
Yeah.
Climbing higher, change, air getting colder.
Change. Exactly. And as airline ticket costs increase, the number of people traveling decreases.
Ah, this time changes in opposite directions happening concurrently. Costs up, travel down.
Right. The video also points out some common grammatical patterns you often see with this use of as.
Like what?
Like the pattern. As change happens, another change happens, or as change happens, it gets comparative adjective. Recognizing those structures can be a clue that as is being used to link simultaneous changes.
That's helpful. Recognizing patterns definitely speeds up understanding. Okay, fifth use of as. This one is described as a review of basic but important grammar.
Yes, this is using as for making comparisons. Specifically, showing when two things are equal or unequal in some quality.
The classic as structure.
Exactly. It's fundamental for comparisons. The basic pattern is noun A is as adjective adverb as noun B.
Meaning A and B are equal in that quality, like he is as tall as his brother.
Precisely. And the negative form is A is not as adjective adverb as B.
Showing they are unequal. This coffee is not as hot as yesterday's.
Right. The examples from the video illustrate this clearly. Your house is as big as a celebrity's house.
Okay, equal size.
This taco shop is not as good as the one in our neighborhood.
Unequal quality.
Weather today is not as bad as it was yesterday.
Unequal badness, meaning today is better.
All straightforward as core comparisons. The video also correctly reminds learners not to use than in these structures.
Right, you don't say as big then. You use then for different comparisons, like bigger than.
Exactly. A crucial distinction.
Okay. And the sixth and final use of as that this lesson covers.
It's the specific expression as long as.
Ah, as long as. This doesn't mean length here, does it?
No, not in this context. Here, as long as functions as a conditional conjunction. It essentially means only if or provided that.
Okay, so it introduces a condition that must be met.
Exactly. The main clause action depends on the as long as condition being fulfilled.
What are the examples for this conditional meaning?
As long as I save money for 6 months, I'll be able to buy a car this year.
Meaning buying the car is conditional on saving the money? Only if I save.
Correct. You can go to the party as long as you finish your homework.
Going to the party is conditional on finishing homework, provided that you finish.
Right. And we'll arrive at the airport on time as long as there's no traffic.
On-time arrival depends on the condition of no traffic.
Precisely. It sets a necessary condition.
And the video makes an important point about distinguishing this conditional as long as from the literal meaning of length, right?
Yes, absolutely. You wouldn't want to confuse, you can borrow my car as long as you drive carefully, conditional with something like, the snake was as long as my arm. Literal length.
Context usually makes it pretty clear which meaning is intended.
Generally, yes. The surrounding sentence structure usually gives it away.
Okay, that covers the 6 uses of as role purpose, while simultaneity, because simultaneous changes, comparisons as, and biconditional as long as only if. Another very busy word.
Definitely keeps us on our toes.
Right. Okay, we've tackled for and as. Now let's move on to a really interesting grammatical topic. Embedded questions.
Ah, embedded questions. These are so useful for sounding more natural and polite.
That's what the next 3-step English lesson explains, how we can make a question sound softer, more polite, or more indirect by, well, embedding them inside other sentences or questions.
It's a really valuable skill. Direct questions can sometimes sound abrupt or demanding in English, especially when asking for information. Embedding them smooths things out.
So understanding how to form them correctly is essential for sounding more natural.
Absolutely. It's a key feature of fluent, polite English conversation.
The video starts by showing the contrast, right? Direct question versus its embedded version.
Yes, comparing them side by side really clarifies the transformation.
Like the direct question, what time does the bus leave?
Becomes the embedded question. Can you tell me what time the bus leaves?
Much softer. Another one, who ate my sandwich?
Becomes, do you know who ate my sandwich?
Still asking, but less direct accusation maybe. And what is the password?
Turns into the more indirect.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what the password is.
Okay, looking at these transformations, what's the most obvious difference you see happening?
Well, two main things jump out. First, the word order within the question part often changes.
How so?
It often switches from the typical question word order, like verb before subject, to the more standard statement word order, subject before verb. Notice what time the bus leaves, not does the bus leave, and what the password is, not is the password.
Ah, right. The word order flips back. And the second thing...
The second thing is the disappearance sometimes of auxiliary verbs like do, does, or did that were needed in the direct question.
Like in the bus example, does vanish.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they're usually introduced by those polite framing phrases. Can you tell me, do you know? I'd like to know.
Okay, so word order change and sometimes dropping auxiliaries are key. The video then breaks down the specific rules for different types of direct questions. Let's start with questions using the be verb is, are, was, were.
Right. Questions like, where are the keys? Or how old is he?
What's the main rule when we embed these be verb questions?
The fundamental rule here is simple but crucial. You move the be verb so it comes after the subject in the embedded question.
Okay, move the be verb after the subject. Example.
So the direct question, where are the car keys? Becomes the embedded, can you tell me where the car keys are?
Are moves after the car keys.
Exactly. And the video specifically flags the common mistake learners make here.
Which is?
Forgetting to move the be verb. Saying something like, can you tell me where are the car keys? That sounds incorrect to native speakers.
Right. Gotta remember that shift. What are other examples from the video?
How long is the movie? Becomes, do you know how long the movie is?
Okay, is moves after the movie.
And why is the city so polluted? Becomes, I wonder why the city is so polluted.
Is moves after the city. Got it. And that last example, I wonder why the city is so polluted, ends with a period, not a question mark.
Yes, that's a really important point the video makes too. Even though we call them embedded questions, the overall sentence might be a statement, like, I wonder, or I'd like to know, and therefore ends with a period.
So the final punctuation depends on the main introductory clause, not the embedded question part itself.
Exactly. If the introductory part is a question, do you know, the whole thing gets a question mark. If it's a statement, I wonder, it gets a period.
Good tip. Okay, that's for be verbs. Now, what about direct questions that use the auxiliary verb do, like do, does, or did?
Questions like, where did he go? Or what time does she start?
Right. What happens to these do auxiliaries when we embed the question?
This is another key transformation.
Sure.
The auxiliary verb do, does, or did is actually removed entirely.
Removed completely.
Yes. And the main verb from the original question takes on the appropriate tense, past tense, that was said present tense, if it was does, etc.
Okay, let's see an example. Where did he go?
Becomes, do you know where he went?
Did disappears, and go changes to the past tense went.
Exactly. Another one, what time does she start? Becomes, I'm not sure what time she starts.
Okay, does disappears, and start gets the third person's starts.
Right. This is another area where learners often make mistakes.
How so?
By incorrectly keeping the do auxiliary in the embedded question. For example, saying, do you know where did he go? Or, I'm not sure what time does she start. You have to remember to remove the dodos did and adjust the main verb.
Got it. Remove dodos did, change main verb tense. That requires a bit more processing than just moving the be verb.
It does take a bit more practice to get automatic.
Now, the video also mentioned an easier scenario. What if the direct question we want to embed doesn't use be or do at all?
Yes. Questions where the question word is the subject, like, who ate my sandwich? Or, what happened?
Right. What happens with those?
Good news here. For those types, there's usually no change needed to the word order when you embed them.
Really? No change?
Nope. You can often just plug it straight in after your introductory phrase, who ate my sandwich, becomes, do you know who ate my sandwich?
Simple as that.
Pretty much. What happened? Could become, I wonder what happened. These are definitely the easiest ones to handle because you don't need to reorder or move auxiliaries.
That's a relief. Always nice when there's an easier case. Okay, one more category. Yes/no questions.
Right. Questions that can be answered with a simple yes or no, and don't start with a question word like who, what, where, etc. Like, are they hungry?
Yeah.
Or did he call?
Exactly. How do we embed those types of questions?
For yes/no questions, the key is to introduce the embedded question using the words if or whether.
Okay, use if or whether. Example.
The direct question, are they hungry, becomes, let's ask if they're hungry.
Okay. We add if, and notice the word order change too. They are hungry, not are they hungry. That be verb rule still applies.
Exactly. Good catch. The be verb still moves after the subject. Another one, was he angry? Becomes, do you know if he was angry?
Add if, move was after he.
Got, is this vegetarian? Becomes, could you tell me if this is vegetarian?
Add if, move is after this. Makes sense. Can we use whether too? Like, let's ask whether they're hungry.
Yes, whether works grammatically in the same way. Do you know whether he was angry? Could you tell me whether this is vegetarian?
Is there any difference between using if and whether?
The video points out that in everyday conversation, if tends to be more common and sounds a little more casual. Whether can sometimes sound slightly more formal, or it might be preferred in certain written contexts or when presenting alternatives explicitly, like whether or not. But often they're interchangeable, and if is very frequently used.
Okay, so for conversation, if is probably the go-to for embedding yes-no questions.
Generally, yes. It sounds very natural.
So essentially, for yes-no questions, we add if or whether, and then we make sure the word order follows the statement pattern, subject-verb, applying the same be-verb movement or DA auxiliary removal rules as needed.
That's a perfect summary of how to handle embedded yes-no questions.
Great. Finally, to help us use these, the video provides a really helpful list of common starting phrases, those introductory clauses we use before the embedded question itself.
Yes, those framing phrases are key to making the whole thing sound polite and indirect.
Can you remind us of a few of those useful phrases?
Sure. Some very common ones include, do you know?
Classic.
Can you tell me? Or slightly more polite, could you tell me?
Also very common.
Phrases like, let's ask, or let's find out, or let's see.
Right, when suggesting finding the information.
I wonder. For expressing curiosity to yourself or others.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. When expressing uncertainty about the answer.
Okay.
And I'd like to know, which is a polite way to request the information.
That's a great list. Using these phrases before the restructured question part really changes the tone, doesn't it?
Absolutely. They act as the main part of the sentence, softening the request or inquiry that follows in the embedded question. It makes your communication much smoother and less demanding.
Fantastic. That's a really clear and very practical overview of how to form and use embedded questions in English. Super useful skill.
Agreed. Mastering these makes a big difference in sounding fluent and polite.
Okay, let's move on now to another very practical language skill covered in these lessons. Knowing how to ask about amenities in English.
Amenities, like what facilities or services are available somewhere.
Exactly. The next 3-step English lesson focuses specifically on how to inquire about what's available in a particular place, like a hotel, a theater, an office building, etc.
This is definitely a situation you run into all the time when you're out and about, especially when traveling or visiting new places. Knowing the right way, the natural-sounding way to ask is really helpful.
The lesson actually starts with a short dialogue. It takes place in a movie theater.
Okay.
And one person asks, do they have any vending machines here?
Straightforward question.
And then later, they also ask about the location of a water fountain. The video makes an interesting point, though. It says that while asking, are there any vending machines here, would also be perfectly correct grammatically.
Right, using there is, there are, is standard for existence.
Yeah. The question, do they have any vending machines here, can often sound more natural to native speakers, especially when referring to businesses or companies, using they as a sort of general subject for the establishment.
That's an interesting nuance. Do they have versus are there any? What's the subtle difference in feeling or implication there?
That's what I was wondering.
Well, I think the do they have pattern often implies you're asking if the establishment, the they, possesses or provides that amenity as part of their service or offering. Kind of treats the business as an entity that owns or manages these things.
Okay. Like asking about the company's provisions.
Sort of. Whereas
farther
is maybe more neutral, simply inquiring about the existence of something in that location without necessarily focusing on who provides it or whether it's an official offering.
So, do they have Wi-Fi? Feels like asking about the hotel's service, well, is there Wi-Fi here, is just asking if a signal exists in the space.
That's a good way to capture the slight difference, yes. However, as the video rightly points out, this is a pretty subtle nuance.
Yeah, people would understand either way, right?
Absolutely. In most everyday situations, people will understand your meaning perfectly well, whichever pattern you choose. But do they have? Might sound just a touch more common when asking about a specific business's facilities.
Okay. The video then provides a general sentence pattern for this. Does is noun have noun.
Right, where the first noun is the entity and the second is the amenity.
And it explains that they is often used as that general subject when we don't know exactly who runs the place or who to ask directly.
Like in the theater example, do they have vending machines? They just means the theater management or owners in general.
But if you're asking about a singular noun, like a specific business name, the video used Starbucks as an example you'd use does.
Right. Does Starbucks have Wi-Fi? Because Starbucks is singular.
Okay. Can you give us a few more examples of this does noun have noun pattern from the video?
Sure. A very common one is asking in a restaurant, do you have a menu? Where you refers to the restaurant staff or establishment. Or maybe at a hotel reception on a rainy day, do they have umbrellas? Meaning, does the hotel provide them?
Makes sense.
Asking about a specific feature. Does the restaurant have a terrace? Restaurant is singular.
Right.
Does the library have a water fountain? Library is singular.
Okay.
Inquiring about an offer, do they have a student discount? They're referring to the shop or venue. And even on a larger scale, does New York have a subway system? New York City is singular.
Okay, those examples really clarify the pattern. Dodos plus the entity, they, you, the restaurant, New York, plus have, plus the amenity, menu, umbrellas, terrace, subway.
Exactly. It's a very useful and common pattern for these kinds of inquiries.
And the practice section in the video, it seems, reinforces this by asking the listener to choose between do they have and is there in different scenarios.
Right, probably to help solidify that subtle distinction.
It feels like really thinking about the context. Are you asking about what a specific business provides, or just about what exists in a place can help guide the choice?
That's a good approach.
Yeah.
While the lines can blur, considering whether you're addressing or referring to a specific organization versus just asking about the presence of something in a location, can nudge you towards the slightly more natural-sounding choice for that context. But again, don't stress too much. Both are usually understood.
Good advice. Okay, practical stuff for asking about what's available. Now, let's shift focus again, this time to expressing regret.
Apologies. Another crucial social interaction skill.
Exactly. The next 3-step English lesson teaches us how to extend apologies, which means, going beyond just a quick sorry and providing more context or explanation.
Right. A simple sorry is often fine, but sometimes a situation calls for a bit more. Extending an apology effectively often involves showing you understand why you're apologizing and maybe the impact it had.
And this lesson focuses on a very specific and useful grammatical structure for doing that, right?
Yes. It highlights a particular way to add depth and explanation to your apology.
The dialogue used in this lesson involves someone apologizing because they couldn't make it to something due to unexpected heavy rain.
Okay. A common reason for canceling plans.
And the key sentence the video pulls out is, "No, I'm sorry, Jack. If I'd known it was going to rain like this, I would have told you I'd join another time."
Right. That's much more elaborate than just, sorry I couldn't make it.
Definitely. The video then explains the grammar behind this and why crafting an apology like this works well. What's the main grammatical structure being used here?
The core structure here is the third conditional.
Third conditional. Okay, what's that used for again?
The third conditional is specifically used to talk about hypothetical situations in the past, things that didn't happen, and their imagined past results, which also didn't happen because the condition wasn't met.
Okay, hypothetical past conditions and results. What's the typical pattern?
The typical grammatical pattern is, if plus past perfect phrase would have plus past participle phrase.
Okay, if plus had plus past participle would have plus past participle.
Exactly. This structure lets the speaker explain what they would have done differently in the past if the past circumstances had been different from what they actually were.
So looking at the example again, if I'd known it was going to rain like this, that's the if plus past perfect part, right? I'd known as I had known.
Correct. That's the hypothetical past condition, knowing about the rain, which they didn't.
I would have told you I'd join another time. That's the would have plus past participle part. Would have told.
Yes. That's the imagined past result or action that would have followed if the condition, knowing about the rain, had been true.
So what does using this third conditional structure achieve in the specific context of an apology like this? Why is it effective?
Well, it achieves several things. First, it clearly explains that the reason for not attending was something unforeseen, the heavy rain.
Right, it gives context.
Second, by stating what they would have done if they had known, I would have told you, it strongly implies they regret the outcome and that they would have acted differently and more considerately if possible.
It shows consideration for the other person's plans.
Exactly. It demonstrates they understand the potential inconvenience caused by their absence and implies it wasn't due to carelessness or lack of interest. The initial, "I'm sorry," softens it further, of course.
So it combines the apology, "I'm sorry," with an explanation rooted in a hypothetical past, if I'd known, and a statement of what the preferred past action would have been. "I would have told you."
Precisely. It makes the apology feel more sincere and complete.
The video then provides that clear sentence pattern. If plus past perfect phrase plus would have plus past participle phrase. And it follows up with several more examples to show how this pattern works in different situations.
Yeah, seeing more examples helps solidify the structure.
One is almost identical to the dialogue. "If I'd known it was going to rain like this, I would have told you another time." Another one. "If I'd known it was going to be crowded, I would have made a reservation."
Okay, hypothetical past knowledge about crowds leading to a different past action, making a reservation.
And "if we'd ordered another pizza, we wouldn't have gotten hungry."
Using the negative wouldn't have for a negative result that could have been avoided. Good example. If the past condition, ordering pizza, had been true, the negative past result, getting hungry, wouldn't have happened.
What do these various examples really show about how useful the third conditional is when you want to extend an apology or express regret about the past?
They show it's a really powerful tool for it. By stating what you would have done differently if you'd had different information or if circumstances were different, you demonstrate a deeper understanding of the situation.
And you kind of indirectly take some responsibility for the negative outcome, even if it wasn't entirely your fault, by showing you wish it had been different.
Exactly. It conveys regret about the past situation and its consequences much more effectively than just saying, "Oops, sorry."
And the practice section of the video really focuses on getting that grammar right, doesn't it? Making sure you use the past perfect, had plus past participle, in the if clause.
And would have plus past participle in the main result clause. Getting those verb forms correct is key to using the third conditional accurately.
Definitely a very useful and versatile structure to master for adding more depth and sincerity to apologies or expressions of past regret in English.
Absolutely. It allows you to move beyond a simple sorry and show more thoughtfulness and understanding, a key part of polite and effective communication.
Okay, excellent. Now for our final grammar focus from these 3-step English lessons, the topic of how to make a promise in English.
Promises. Expressing commitment to future actions, another fundamental communication act.
This lesson looks at some key ways we can clearly state that we intend to do something in the future.
Making promises clearly builds trust and manages expectations. English offers several straightforward ways to do this, and this lesson seems to highlight 2 of the most common patterns.
The dialogue featured in this lesson includes the simple but important sentence, "I promise that I'll make it this time."
Okay, a clear statement of commitment.
The video breaks this down. First, the clear statement of intent. "I promise that."
Right, that phrase signals a promise immediately.
Followed by a future simple tense phrase specifying the action. "I'll make it this time." "I'll" being "I will."
Okay, so promise that plus future action. What's the significance of using this structure for promises?
Well, it's very direct, isn't it?
Extremely.
Right.
I promise that. Leaves no doubt about the speaker's firm intention to fulfill the commitment that follows. And using the future simple tense, "I will make it, I'll make it," clearly specifies what action they are committing to doing in the future.
And in this specific example, adding "this time" adds extra emphasis, right?
Yes. It strongly suggests a contrast with a previous time when maybe they didn't make it, reinforcing the commitment for the current instance.
Okay. So the video gives the basic pattern. I promise that plus future simple tense. But it also introduces a slightly different but equally common pattern for making promises, right?
Yes, it mentions the alternative pattern. I promise plus infinitive phrase.
Infinitive being to plus base verb.
Exactly. And the video actually pulls an example of this pattern from the dialogue itself. I promise to teach you all I know.
Okay. So I promise to teach instead of I promise that I will teach. What's the difference, if any, between these 2 patterns? Promise that plus will versus promise plus to verb.
It's a good question. Functionally, both clearly convey a promise or commitment.
They mean the same thing.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
The I promise that plus future simple pattern might feel just a tiny bit more direct, more declarative perhaps.
And the I promise plus infinitive pattern?
Using to plus base verb might sometimes feel a touch more formal, maybe. Or perhaps it places a slightly stronger focus on the action itself, to teach. But honestly, in most everyday situations, they're very interchangeable.
So you could say, I promise that I'll call you, or I promise to call you, and they both work fine.
Absolutely. Both sound perfectly natural and clearly express the promise to call. Native speakers use both frequently.
Okay, good to know they're flexible.
Yeah.
The speaking examples in the video reinforce these two patterns.
What were some of those?
Examples like, I promise that I'll study, using that plus will.
Okay.
I promise to come back soon, using to plus infinitive.
Right.
I promise that he will become famous, using that plus will about someone else.
Mm.
And the practice section then drills these structures, asking the listener to choose between using that I'll or to after I promise.
Right, helping to solidify both patterns.
It seems the key is just paying attention to the verb form that follows I promise.
Yeah.
If you use will, you generally need that. If you use the base verb, you need
Exactly. The structure of the promised action itself guides whether you use the that plus future simple clause or the to plus infinitive phrase after the initial I promise. Both are reliable ways to state your commitment.
Okay, that covers making promises. Phew. We have now covered a lot of English grammar points from these lessons.
We certainly have. Future perfect, by the time, the many faces of for and as, embedded questions, asking about amenities, extending apologies, making promises. Quite a range.
Definitely. But before we wrap up the discussion of the content, let's briefly touch on the vocabulary building insights that were mentioned in the outros of several of these videos.
Yes, the vocabulary aspect. Equally important as grammar.
A number of the videos mentioned a core 2,000 words ebook as a free resource for learning essential expressions. What's the value, in your view, of focusing vocabulary study on these kinds of core lists?
Oh, the value is immense, especially for learners starting out or wanting to build a solid foundation quickly. Focusing on core vocabulary lists is incredibly efficient.
Why efficient?
Because these core words are, by definition, the ones that appear with the highest frequency in everyday communication, speaking, writing, listening. They're the building blocks.
So mastering them gives you more bang for your buck, so to speak.
Exactly. By mastering even a relatively small set of these core words, say, the first few hundred, you can suddenly understand a surprisingly large percentage of everyday conversations and texts. It allows you to start communicating meaningfully much faster.
And the fact that English Class 101 offers this kind of resource for free really highlights how important they think this approach is.
It does. It underscores the foundational importance of core vocabulary in their language learning methodology. Start with the most useful words first.
We also saw examples of vocabulary quizzes in the videos focusing on specific themes, like one on experiences and activities.
With words like try, explore, visit, book, watch.
Right. And another on thinking and awareness.
Expect, remember, understand, realize, imagine.
What's the benefit of learning vocabulary grouped thematically like this, rather than just random lists?
Learning in thematic groups offers several cognitive advantages. Firstly, it helps build stronger connections and associations between related words in your memory.
So they stick better.
Yes, and they become easier to recall and use appropriately because they're linked. Secondly, it allows you to develop a more comprehensive way to talk about specific topics. Instead of learning isolated words, you're building a network of vocabulary around common themes, which is much more practical for actual communication. You learn words related to travel together, or words related to feelings together.
That makes a lot of sense. Learning related words together helps you talk about that topic more fully.
Precisely.
Now, one of the video outros specifically mentioned 3 crucial steps to mastering and speaking English with confidence. Do you remember what they were?
Let me think. I believe they were. Engaging in quick conversation lessons.
Okay, step 1. Lessons.
Actively practicing what you've learned.
Step 2. Practice. Very important.
And then regularly testing your understanding to ensure mastery.
Step 3. Testing. Lessons, practice, testing. This seems to align closely with the English Class 101 approach overall. Why are these 3 steps considered so crucial for language acquisition?
Well, they form a really effective and well-rounded learning cycle. The lessons provide the initial exposure to new language grammar, vocab, maybe pronunciation, hopefully in a relevant context.
Right, you get the input.
Then, active practice is absolutely critical because that's where you use the language. You move from passive knowledge to active skill. It reinforces understanding and builds fluency and confidence.
You have to actually try saying it or writing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And finally, testing is essential for a couple of reasons. It helps you identify your weak spots, which you haven't quite mastered yet. And it also helps solidify what you have learned, making the knowledge more permanent and easier to access when you need it.
So it's a continuous cycle. Learn, use, check.
Precisely. That learn, practice, test cycle is a cornerstone of effective and lasting language learning.
Finally, there was also that mention of the concept of core words again, but with some interesting statistics.
Oh yeah, the frequency stats. Those are always eye-opening.
Right. That the top 100 most frequent words make up something like 50% of everyday conversation.
Incredible, isn't it? Just 100 words cover half of what's typically said.
And the top 200 cover maybe 60, 70%.
And the top 300 cover around 80%.
It really drives home the power of starting with those high-frequency words for rapid progress in comprehension and basic communication.
Absolutely. It's the Pareto principle applied to language learning. Focus on the vital few words first.
And the videos also mention that English Class 101 offers free tools specifically for learning these core words.
Like what kind of tools?
Things like audio slideshows.
Good for hearing pronunciation.
Comprehensive word banks.
Useful for review and organizing.
And spaced repetition flashcards.
SRS flashcards. Those are known to be very effective for memorization.
Why are these kinds of tools and techniques, audio, word banks, SRS, considered so beneficial for learning vocabulary?
Well, they cater to different aspects of learning and leverage effective memory strategies. Audio slideshows engage auditory learning and ensure correct pronunciation from the start. Word banks allow for organized review and focused study.
And the spaced repetition.
Spaced repetition systems, or SRS, are based on cognitive science principles about memory. They optimize retention by showing you new or difficult words more frequently at first.
And then less frequently as you demonstrate you're mastering them, right? Increasing intervals.
Exactly. It interrupts the forgetting curve at just the right time, making memorization much more efficient than just cramming lists. By providing tools like these, platforms make essential vocabulary learning more accessible and effective for learners.
It's just a commitment to not just teaching content, but also providing effective tools for actually learning and remembering it.
Which is crucial for real progress.
Well, that brings us pretty much to the end of our very detailed deep dive into these transcripts from EnglishClass101.com. We've certainly covered a huge amount of ground today.
Indeed, we have. From the nuances of future perfect and by the time, through the many uses of for and as, the politeness of embedded questions, practical phrases for amenities, sophisticated apologies with the third conditional, clear ways to make promises.
And wrapping up with those valuable strategies for building vocabulary, effectively using core words and smart tools.
It was a comprehensive tour through some key areas of English grammar and learning.
We sincerely hope that this in-depth exploration has not only maybe clarified some things or reinforced your understanding of these structures and concepts,
and has also really highlighted how important they are and how you can actually use them for more effective, more confident English communication in your own life.
Absolutely. Maybe take a moment now to think about which of these areas we discussed really resonated most strongly with you.
Yeah, which parts felt most interesting or maybe most immediately useful for your current English learning goals?
Was it finally getting the hang of using by the time with the right tense?
Or maybe discovering just how many different things the preposition for can actually mean?
Or perhaps understanding how using embedded questions can really make you sound more polite and natural in conversations.
Whatever stood out to you, hopefully you found some valuable takeaways.
And here's maybe a final thought-provoking question for you to consider as we wrap up.
Okay.
In what specific ways might a deeper, more nuanced understanding of these kinds of fundamental aspects of English grammar and vocabulary, the things we talked about today, ultimately enhance your ability to connect more meaningfully with other people in English?
Perhaps to achieve your personal goals or your professional goals in a world where English is often so important.
It really goes beyond just knowing the rules, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's about being able to use all these elements, the grammar, the vocabulary, the politeness strategies, effectively and confidently to express yourself clearly, accurately, and with the impact you intend.
Well said. Okay, thank you so much to each and every one of you who have started with us right until the very end of this quite detailed deep dive.
Yes, thank you for dedicating your valuable time to exploring these topics with us today. We appreciate you listening.
We really do. And before we sign off completely, just one last enthusiastic request from us. If you found this in-depth exploration helpful, if you learned something useful, and if you're eager for more detailed dives into language learning like this one,
please make sure to subscribe to the channel.
yes, hit that subscribe button. We have so much more valuable content planned, more deep dives that we're really excited to explore with you in the future.
We look forward to it.
So until our next deep dive together, goodbye for now.
Goodbye, everyone.